recorded. So, okay. So we are now officially being recorded. So, so just give me your full name.
Okay, my full name is Albertine May Cherry Dent.
Excellent. And how old are you?
75.
Okay. So, tell me, did you move to Hammond, or were you born in Hammond? How did you get to Hammond?
Okay, I was born in Gary, Indiana, and my parents moved to Hammond when I was 9 months old. So I've been in Hammond since that time, since 9 months.
Okay. So tell me who your parents are.
My father is Albert William Cherry. My mom is Hannah May Thompson Cherry.
Okay. And do you have brothers and sisters?
I had 3 brothers. My mom had 5 pregnancies. 6 pregnancies. 2 died at birth, and then I was the oldest of the 4 that survived. I had 3 brothers. I only have 1 who is living at this time.
Okay. Can you name your brothers and sisters, even if they're passed on?
Okay. My oldest brother would have been Robert Earl Cherry. He was known as Bobby. The next brother was...
Oh, I'm sorry. So is he still alive?
No, he is deceased.
Okay. At what age did he die?
He died at age 50... I think around 54, 55.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, and so the next...
The next brother was George William Cherry. He was known as Skip. He is deceased also. Okay,
and so he was... How old was he? 53, 54?
No, he was younger when he passed away. He was probably 35, 36.
Okay. And then the next brother or sister?
The next brother is Benjamin Glenn Cherry. He is alive. He is living in Hammond, and he is currently, let's see, he would be, what is his birth date? I think he is 61.
Okay, he's 61.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and the next one?
That's it.
Okay, that's it. So you were the only girl
that
out of...
survived and myself, right? It was 4 of us. The other 2 pregnancies my mom had ended in them, dying at birth.
Oh, I get you. Okay. So tell me, so once you got there, I assume all your brothers and sisters were there and you guys were just kids growing up in Hammond.
Well, I was the only one that was born in Gary. The other siblings were born in Hammond, and we grew up in Hammond.
Okay. And tell me what street you grew up on, and we're going to get into the life of you guys while you were on that street. So what street was it?
All right, the first street that my parents lived on when they moved to Hammond was on Field Street.
Okay.
And then they moved from there to Merrill Street. Now, at that time, my parents, my mom's uncle had a house that he encouraged anyone who needed a place to stay, especially coming from the South, and he did a lot with the Underground Railroad, bringing people from Tennessee up to Hammond, Indiana. He had a house where he housed a lot of the family members and others needing a place to stay. So his house that he had was on Merrill Street, and that's where my mom and dad stayed until they got their own place, which was part of the time they lived on Cleveland Street. Then they got their own place again on Ames Street. So they moved around until they bettered themselves to whatever at that point. I think most of the time they were living with someone else until they were able to get their own place.
Okay. So when your uncle, who had that house on Merrill Street, did they go to? You said they went to Field Street first, and then they went to that Merrill Street house.
I believe. I can't remember, and I should have gotten some of that out because I probably have some of that history someplace. The first places that they located, first places that they lived when they moved back to Hammond. But my uncle, who was Grant Harwell, is the one who had the house. He encouraged family members to move from Tennessee, which was in Stanton, Tennessee, moved up to Hammond because he got them jobs at what was known as the Car Wheel, which was Pullman Standard at that time.
Ah, okay. So did your father work at Pullman Standard?
My father did work at Pullman Standard for a while. He also worked at some place that was part of making tanks and et cetera, because at that time the war, 1940, is when the war was going on, and my dad worked at the, they call it the Car Wheel, and he worked there, for a while.
Okay. Was that also, now obviously your brothers were small then, and so your uncle, Grant Hardwell, Harwell,
Harwell, Harwell, Harwell. Mm-hmm.
Harwell. Okay.
Yes.
Now, that is Leo's what? Leo Harwell.
Was Leo's uncle, his father's brother.
Okay, his uncle. Okay. So tell me a little bit about the your uncle, just for a second, because that's an interesting scenario of really supporting the Underground Railroad by funneling people from Stanton, Tennessee to Hammond, Indiana.
Right.
Tell me how that transpired.
Well, the information I was given is that my uncle left Stanton because he worked for the railroad, and he initially was a Pullman porter. And then he got up here, and he started working, and he started encouraging other family members to come up this way, and he provided the houses for them, layovers, if they either stayed in Hammond before they tried to go on to Chicago. He did that. He, in one instance that I remember my grandmother telling me that there was a person who had left Stanton, Tennessee, running from whomever, his master or whomever, he was an early slave, and he got as far as Hammond. My uncle was housing him, holding him, and saving him, and my uncle had built such a reputation with the powers that be here in the city that anything my uncle said, they took it as truth and face value, and they had a lot of respect for him. Well, however, my uncle was hiding this man in the floor of the house. And they came to my uncle's house asked my uncle, had he seen this person? My uncle said, no, he had not. And so they left him alone. They left the house, and my uncle just, proceeded to move about, and as soon as the coast was clear, he got the guy out the house and got him to Chicago. So that was one incident my grandmother and my mom had told me when I was very young about how he had helped so many people. That's one thing. But he housed so many people because a lot of relatives, they knew if they wanted to come north, all they had to do was to call Uncle Grant Harwell, and he would provide a place for them, or he had other people who would help him provide places for them until they got on to wherever else they wanted to go, which in most cases was Chicago, and then some of them went on as far as Wisconsin.
Okay. What year was this when he was doing most of the hiding of people and all that?
It had to have been, and you know what? I have all of that in some family history because I compiled all of that for one of our family reunions. And I would probably have a better idea of some of that we can get together later, and I can look for those dates if dates were given. I don't know if the actual dates were given, but I remember the story verbatim, based on what they told me. So I can't remember what year that would have been. It might be in that history. I'll look for it and maybe give it to you later.
Okay, great. So, now let's get back to your mom and dad raising you in Hammond. And which house was it that you grew up with most of the time? Was it Cleveland House or Ames House?
No, neither. After my parents left, I can't remember which order they stayed at Ames or Field Street, but we did move to Howard Street. Mm-hmm. And Howard is right over, really it's across the street from where Withams is now located. There was a house there that my mom and dad lived in. We lived upstairs over the Luckett family. There was a family in Hammond. The last name was Luckett, Luckett. But Mom and Dad had an upstairs apartment where we lived, and that's where my younger brothers, all three of them were born while they lived on Howard Street in Hammond.
Okay. So tell me how life, and that's where you grew up that was the house that, you had most of your rearing in that particular house.
Well, that was until I went to school, and I went to Wallace School, and it was sometime later than that, then my parents moved back to Field Street, which was in the 1100 block of Field, and we had an upstairs apartment over, there was a pool hall downstairs. It was called Moses Pool Hall, and we lived there until I started maybe 7th or 8th grade, because I went to Maywood School at that time. And at that time, my parents opened up their business, which was a dry cleaning business and they named it Cherry Cleaners, and it was on Conkey Street. And when they opened up that business, we moved from Field Street to Conkey Street because we lived in back of the dry cleaners.
Okay. Well, you guys must have, from Fields to Merrill to Cleveland to Ames to Howard, back to Fields to Conkey, you guys know Hammond. If there's anybody know Hammond, you guys know Hammond.
Right. Well, that's how it was at that time, because there were very few people of color, black people, in Hammond. And so everyone just pretty much, who could help one another did so. So they offered, living quarters for people. And not too many people at that time owned their own homes. There were a couple who, finally owned their own homes. Most of the people at that time were renters, and they rented, their houses, apartments, or whatever from whomever. I have no idea who we originally rented from or who the people were. I never thought that deep into it. I probably, there might be some documentation of some of that elsewhere. I don't know where it would be at this point.
So what was the psyche like at that point? Because you said that there wasn't a lot of black people at that time,
right?
And the fact that people opened up their homes to you, and was it more of it takes a village to raise a child and raise people?
Most definitely, because none of us would have made it this far without having the whole neighborhood helping, because it was during that time that, and my kids have no concept of it. They have a little bit concept of it. During that time growing up, there was no way I could do anything wrong without being punished by someone who knew my parents. They had the authority and the right. If they caught me doing something wrong, they would grab me, beat my behind, bring me home, and my mom and dad would beat me again. They never questioned the adult who had to chastise me or discipline me for doing something. It was okay. It was understood. If you caught my child doing something wrong, you take care of him and then bring him home to me, and we'll take care of it again.
And that was the prevailing idea of that city, because the same thing happened to me, and I'm a generation down from you. So yes, exactly. That's how it was, and everyone had the authority. If you were from that community, to
right, and
whoop your butt.
It was a village raising the children, and there was very few people that could not say, discipline you. And I can't offhand even think. I'm sure there had to have been some that my parents probably would have said, okay, But majority of the people that I know when growing up, we were all cautious about doing anything in front of anybody, letting anybody else catch it, because we knew they were going to get us and take us home, and we were going to get it again.
Okay. Okay. Spare the rod, spoil the child, I get.
Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about your dad and him at Pullman Standard, and how that all came about, and how that affected your life.
The little bit that I know about that is that they had the war was going on, and everybody was working, and they were working making tanks or guns or bullets or whatever, and we had a big part in Hammond at the Pullman Standard plant and the car wheel right next to it, where they did a lot of that. So everybody was working there. My dad was called to go into the military, but for whatever reason he didn't go. So he worked at the car wheel, as it was called, and I'm sure, there was another name for it, but that's all that they ever referred to, and I never bothered to pursue to ask anything other than that. But he did not go into the service. Other people had gone into the service, but Dad did not. But Dad just worked around, and then my grandfather, my father's father, who was William Bear Paul Cherokee. He was part Cherokee Indian. His name was William Bear Paul Cherry. He worked in Chicago. Now, he would take the streetcar every day and go to Chicago and work. And my dad did a lot of that, too, and he did a lot of car repair work with my grandfather.
Okay. And did he was that streetcar, I know there was a trolley or something on Conkey Street. Did he catch it there?
Yes. He would get the streetcar on Conkey and would go into Chicago. Now, sometime during that working period, my grandfather got a car, and then he would drive to Chicago. So I can only imagine not having the roads like we have now, that how long that would have taken to go back and forth to Chicago. But he worked on the south side of Chicago. Where exactly, I don't know and don't remember. But he did eventually get a car. But prior to getting the car, the streetcar was a mode of transportation, or riding with someone else who was going that way, to work.
Okay. So now, tell me a little bit about your mom and what she did while she was, with your dad. What's her story?
All right. My mom and dad both were educated in Hammond Public Schools. My father, when he first got here from Cairo, Illinois, his family lived in Calumet City. And there was only one school for anyone to attend in this area, and that was Hammond High. And then Tech opened up a year after, so Tech came into existence. Well, my father went to Tech. My mom went to Hammond High.
Okay. What year was that? Do you know?
No.
Kind of around ballpark? No.
Yeah, my mom graduated from Hammond High in 1936.
1936?
1932.
Okay.
She graduated from Hammond High. And my dad, unfortunately, didn't finish school because when the war, there was skirmish or wars or something going on, Daddy left to go and work. So he did not finish high school. He got to his senior year, but never, graduated.
Okay. And I know that there was Pullman and Bethlehem and Inland Steel and U.S. Steel. Was that the prevailing place that there was work in Hammond area, the surrounding areas, more so labor kind of work? Was that what was happening with the men at the time?
Well, yeah, most of them had the opportunity to go to, the mills if they were able to get in through. Let me see, how did they were doing that? Some of them got to the mills. Most of them did the local stuff here, which was the Pullman Standard and the other, industries there were quite a few industries in Hammond. All of them I can't even begin to tell you because I can't remember. But there were industries in Hammond that most of the people utilized for their employment. And then others, went to East Chicago because you did have the Youngstown Sheet and Tube and you had the Inland Steel that was over there, right on the lake. So they took advantage of that.
Okay. So what did your mother do as for work?
All right, when my mom graduated from high school is when she got married. And during that interim, she did, domestic work. She worked for different families in town, house cleaning and, housekeeping. And then after my parents opened up their dry cleaners, that's what they did full time. My mom helped my dad in the dry cleaners running it, while my dad still worked a job and ran the dry cleaners because he had to take the clothes to Chicago to be cleaned because there was no cleaning plant here in Hammond. He did have a Chinese laundry, which was downtown on State Street, that did the shirts and the laundry for my dad for the cleaners. My dad would take those things to the Chinese laundry. But the dry cleaning itself, the pants, suits, dresses, and all that stuff, had to be dry cleaned, had to go to Chicago to a plant. Then he got involved with Vogue Cleaners, which was in Hammond for a period of time. And then there was another Cleaners, which is in Highland, and I'm looking at I can visualize the place, but I can't think of the name of it right now, that opened up, and they started doing on-site dry cleanings where my dad did not have to drive back and forth to Chicago taking the dirty clothes to be dry cleaned and then going back picking them up.
Okay. So now, was that the last job your dad had? Once he stopped working for other corporations and other companies as a laborer, then he went to work for himself.
Well, he also had been involved with running a tavern. He was a co-owner of a tavern in town, and Daddy worked for Smoosier Buick, which was down on Holman Avenue, and he used to, do maintenance work down there. And then eventually, Daddy started selling cars through Smoosier Buick. He would work with them and bring people down there, and anybody my father took down there to buy a car, they automatically bought a car. And then Dad would get so much for either, finding people. Then Daddy said, well, I'm cutting out them. I find the cars myself and sell them myself, So he did a little bit of that. Of course, he didn't have the financing that Smoosier or one of the other people would have, to finance people. So his selling of cars had to be cash. So people who were buying a car had to have the cash money, to pay for a car. But Daddy did that also, selling cars.
Okay. So what do you know the name of the tavern or where it was?
It was on Conkey Street. There was a place called The Cave, C-A-V-E. Mm-hmm. Everyone knew The Cave. That was a place to go. And then there was the Knights of Pythians had a lounge and bar that Daddy was very much involved with because he was a member of the Knights of Pythians organization.
I gotcha. Okay, so, and it's probably one of those taverns. Mom told me, "Don't you walk down there," and because we lived at one side of the Conkey, and the taverns were on the other side,
Right.
or down the street.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, and so describe a little bit of the time period, because basically you're saying that there were very few blacks at one point living there amongst I guess it was a white community at first, and then blacks started to move in.
It was white, but it was European white. They were every ethnicity, but anything but pure white, because they were either German, Slovakian, Serbians. There were a lot of that in the area, because they also owned businesses like on Conkey Street, and there was a barbershop next to our dry cleaners. There was a hotel right next to our dry cleaners. Across the street was a hotel. On the corner was a tavern. Then there was the Cave was next door to the hotel across the street. Then there was a grocery store that was run by this guy. His name was Vic, great big fat guy, and I don't know what nationality he was, but I know he was like, he had a farm, and he'd bring his stuff in there and sell his stuff, and there were, Conkey was, at that time, was the business hub of East Hammond, because everything that you needed was pretty much right there in that 1100 block of Conkey. Grocery store, dry cleaners, bars, hotels, and the people who stayed at the hotel really worked at Pullman Standard. Those who could not get houses across Columbia Avenue over in that area, which is now where the St. John Church is and all that area back over there, that was housing for people who worked at Pullman Standard, but mostly the upper echelon, the bosses or whomever lived over there. And that whole area was built specifically for them to live, so they could work at the Pullman plant. So that area, which is from Highland Street going south to Field Street, and from Columbia Avenue over to Willard Street, was all for Pullman Standard people who worked at the Pullman Standard plant.
Okay, so was there? How was the I would say the racial feeling at the time? Was there animosity? Was it, because I know they were, even your uncle Grant was taking people and bringing them through the I guess the Underground Railroad. So was there a lot of racism there, and was there animosity because blacks were moving in, or what was the feeling?
Well, I didn't notice any of that, because all of my friends when I was growing up, especially after I was in grade school and whatever, and then when we moved to Conkey Street with our business, all of my friends were white, because the businesses were all white owned. So I grew up with all of these kids who were Polish, German, whomever. They were right there. So I knew them, and there wasn't anything. The only difference is when we got to school and these kids were coming from other areas, because, mind you, Hammond High was the only school in the area. So Munster was just starting to come into its own, just starting to build up. The doctors who worked at the hospital were living, they couldn't find places in Hammond. That's when they really started building Munster. They lived in Munster, but their kids had to go to school, so they had to bring them to Hammond High. There was no other school for them to go to until they got Munster incorporated and built. Then they wanted to build their own school there. But for years, Hammond High was the only school in the area. So everybody went to Hammond High. I did not notice any problem until, like, maybe in my senior year, when it was time to go to the prom, it was my senior year, because first we had the senior trip to Washington, D.C. I could not go on the senior trip because Washington, D.C. was segregated. There was no place for the black kids to stay. We had to have a black sponsor. Of course, there were no black sponsors in the school at that time because we didn't have any black teachers. So I could not go on the senior trip.
And what year was that?
The next thing that came up was the prom.
What year was that? What year was that?
It was in 1957, 58.
Okay, go ahead.
Then the senior prom came up.
Mm-hmm.
Got my date, ready to go to the prom. Me and Herb Ruffin at that time, we were going to the prom. Well, the prom was going to be held at Woodmar Country Club. Woodmar Country Club did not allow black people in there. So needless to say, they told us we couldn't go to the prom. Well, when my father found that out, he went up to Hammond High. He says, oh, no, she's going to go to the prom, and anybody else who want to go to the prom is going to go to the prom who is black. You go have to find another spot. They said, well, we can't do it. He says, oh, well, my father said, well, we'll see about that. So he was ready to file a lawsuit. The school evidently said, we don't need this. So they skirted around, and they found another spot where they could hold the prom, which happened to be Medure's Dance Land, which is in way north Hammond at that time. Well, even my own classmates did not know this, and we had a 55-year class reunion 2 years ago in Vegas. And when I told that story, they all were like on the floor. They never knew. They knew the venue had been changed. They did not know why. They knew it was supposed to be with Woodmar Country Club, and then it was changed to Medure's Dance Land. When I told them, I said, that's why it was changed. I said, because we could not, as black people, go to Woodmar Country Club because Woodmar Country Club would not allow black people in the country club other than who was cleaning up there. You could not go in there to eat. You could not go out there to play golf. You could not go out there to have a drink like everybody else. So that's when I really realized then. I said, once I got with all these other people at Hammond High, 57, 58, and then all these other little things were coming out because some of the places my white friends went to, we could not go to, like Made Right, which was a hamburger place on Calumet. And this Greek family, Bazookas, had another place called the Red something or another. Well, they were the only place that everybody at school would go to because everybody could go in there. Made Right, you couldn't go in because they did not let black people come in there. Just like we couldn't go to Woolworths for a long time, and that was one of the stores down on Holman Avenue, like to shop or eat. You couldn't go because at that time everything was segregated. And that's in high school. Then it sort of eased up, and then they started fighting for more and more rights. Because just like my mom told me also, years before I even thought of it, she says, for years, Rosalie's was in downtown Hammond and Rothschild's in downtown Hammond. Black people worked there, but they couldn't try on clothes. They couldn't buy clothes and try them on in the store. You had to, just buy it and take it home. You couldn't try on clothes in the store. And they weren't particular about you coming in the store to buy things, but you could come in and buy, but you couldn't try it on.
Could you bring it back if it didn't fit?
I'm not sure. I don't know about that. I'm assuming, and maybe the assumption is totally wrong, but I'm assuming that if it didn't fit, you could bring it back. But then they probably would not have taken it back because a black person had it on,
Oh, right.
So I don't know if that's the case or not, and I have nobody really to ask at this point.
Right. And I think my Aunt Julia worked at Rothschild's.
Yes.
Too.
Yep. Mhm.
Okay. So really it seems like the fact that some white people in Hammond intermingled with black people that they can talk to, see walking down the street, this, that, and the other, there wasn't that much of a problem. But it was the people who lived in all white areas who came to Hammond or the school kind of created the problem because they just weren't aware of black people. They just knew what they heard.
Yeah, I think that's a good assumption. because, I mean, really, growing up here, I was at some of my friends' house all the time. In fact, I go over there and eat just like they would come to my house to eat. They love coming over to eat at my house because my mom was a good cook. Now I go over there and I wanted to do the whole all the Greek food. I learned to eat all of that. I loved it. The Polish people had this duck soup, which was blood soup. I never knew. I used to love it with dumplings and raisins in it. I would eat it like crazy until I found out it was from the blood of ducks. They would drain the blood and make this soup. Then I got deathly ill. I had been eating it for years.
Oh, okay.
It was crazy. And then I found out, I said, well, how is this soup made? They said, they drain the blood from the ducks. I said, they do what? And they said, yeah, that's how it's made. And then my mom makes the dumplings, and she rolls the dumplings and put them into the soup when it's almost done to add the raisins. I'm like, oh, my God, I'm eating blood, But it was crazy. But, you didn't think, you had these people here who, you just felt comfortable with and you did all the things with. There was nothing, to separate you until other people, I guess, started telling people, why are you with these people? Then they start holding up or building up, barriers and bridges. But like I said, we all grew up in the same area and lived next door to one another, thought nothing of it.
Were there any cultural differences that they saw in you guys that they would raise an eyebrow with askance and say, hey, look, that's different right there?
Offhand,
like you said, but go ahead.
Offhand, I'm thinking, I can't think of anything I can specifically say. I'm sure that must have happened, but it escaped my radar. I don't remember it. I'm sure there might have been some things. I know I do have one friend that did ask, because we were Baptist, they were Catholic. So they had totally different, beliefs and religions and, rituals that they did. And they could not understand why we were in church all day on Sunday. And when they went for an hour and they were home, they were done. And we'd be there Sunday school, regular service, afternoon service, BTU at night, all Sunday was it. And they would go for their 6 o'clock masses at St. Michael's over there on Merrill Street, and they do that hour, and they done.
Yeah. Well, I had a dual experience where I went to St. Mary's and school, and so we had mass in the morning. So, and we had to go, 5 days a week.
Right.
But then on Sundays, I would go to church. I was a Methodist, St. John's.
Right.
And so I had 6 days a week, but it was totally different. The Catholic were the hymns, the Stations of the Cross, the kneelings in the pews, the this, that, and the other, and but then the gospel, the black churches were just totally different. So it was two different experiences in a week, every week.
Right.
And even in at St. John, they would cook food downstairs. And so you were at church smelling the food, getting hungrier and hungrier every 5 seconds, waiting for church to get over so you could go get the food.
Right.
So it's just totally different experience kind of thing.
Well, see, and that's why early on I remember being confused about church because I would go with my girlfriends on Saturday for confession. And I wanted to go in and confess to the priest, too. And the priest would say, no, you can't come in here. You can sit out here. And I knew the whole thing. I might as well have become a Catholic because I knew the catechism. I knew all the rosary because I learned from them because I watched them and they were doing it and I wanted to do it, too. And I wanted to, do all the things that they were doing as far as, doing their Saturday. They had to go to Saturday. Right. Every day had to go to confession. And they would go to confession. Then we could do whatever you want to do. Go over to Maywood Park in the summertime and sit out there all day and play. Never had to worry about anything. And then come back home. But then I said, well, why can't I go in and tell the priest, if I had some sins. And he said, no, because you're not Catholic, you know. And I said, well, I know the Rosary and I know the Hail Marys. I know the. I said, nope, but you're not Catholic. So it was funny. It was like a shock, like, okay, well, I can do all this stuff with them, but at a certain point they said, no, that's as far as you can go. You know?
That's it. Stop right
there.
So let me ask you this. Do you remember when John F. Kennedy was campaigning and he went down Conkey Street in a car? Okay, tell me your recollections of that.
That was phenomenal. I'll never forget that because it was just so, you know, right now I think about it, I wish, but there again, it's hindsight, I wish that I had, you know, a camera or had taken pictures, but who was to know what was going to happen, you know. But the whole thing with him coming to Hammond, campaigning, and then going out to, I think it was Woodmar.
Mm-hmm.
Probably was Woodmar Country Club, and having a big rally and stuff. But it was awesome because I remember being there because they said the parade is coming, and so I did that. I did it.
I specifically remember him going past our house.
Oh,
and,
okay.
Mom had. I was a little boy at the time.
Right.
And, Chucky Smith on Mall Street and my cousin, we would make these models, model planes, model cars, we just do models. And so I picked my prized possession model that I made, and I ran out to the car, and you know, the guards were there, or security was there, but he let me walk through to him and give him my model, and he took it from me. So, and that is the one moment that I regret that there wasn't a picture, a camera, a video, or film around. But I only have that in my mind now. I went to the library, the Hammond Library, and I did see pictures of Kennedy, in that car going down the street and this, that, and the other. But it wasn't. I don't even think it was our neighborhood. It was. It may have been our neighborhood. I don't know, but I didn't see too many black people in that picture. So, but the only thing I have is what's in my mind, and then other people's recollection of him going down the street at the time. So, but that was a special time for me.
Yeah, I remember because we were coming out at that time. I lived on Field Street. I was married and had one baby. I think I might have been pregnant with another, because Kennedy was the first president I voted for. My first voting experience was voting for him for president.
Okay, excellent. So now tell me, you kind of alluded to it, with you now, when did you get married, and just tell me the name of your kid.
Okay, I got married in 1958 in September after I graduated high school, and I got married to a man from East Chicago who was from a family of 13 children. His parents owned quite a bit of property in East Chicago. They had come from Alabama. He had been a farmer, and somehow or another did very well, and he had all these children and was buying up property right and left. So the Dents were well known in East Chicago. I married the second youngest son, and we had 3 children. My oldest is Carmen Dent. She is now married. Her last name is Bell, Bell. My son is Craig Nathan Dent. He's married also. He lives in Collierville, Tennessee. And my youngest is Candace Marlene Dent met. She's married, and she lives in Collierville, Tennessee. She and her brother worked this out years ago. They wanted to raise their children together, and he, after graduating from Mississippi Valley State University in Edabina, Mississippi, became an air traffic controller and stayed in Memphis, Tennessee. He met his wife in college, and they lived in Memphis. And then my daughter Candace and her husband, Candace always wanted to live where it was warm. So her goal when she got out of college was to go someplace where it was warm and live. She went to California and stayed out in San Bernardino for maybe 6 months. It was just not her thing because she went out there with a young man that she never should have been with, and that relationship ended, so she came back. She came back to Indiana in Hammond, and she met her current husband. They lived together in Hammond until 8 years ago, and they moved to Tennessee. And when they moved to Collierville, my son and his wife said well, they were going to move closer to her and her children so they could raise these kids together. And so they left Memphis, which is only 11 miles, but they found a house in a subdevelopment where my daughter and her husband now live. And so they live within really walking distance of each other in the subdevelopment. It's a brand new gated area, and they walk back and forth to each other's homes if they want to, but they tend to drive because they go through a bike path to get to each other's house. But they drove it. It's just like not even 5 minutes from each other.
Okay. So their experiences in Hammond. Now, all three of them are in Tennessee, then.
Well, no, the two younger are in Tennessee. The oldest is in Revere, Massachusetts.
Oh, I get you, Massachusetts. That's Carmen.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and the gentleman, Mr. Dent, your husband, what was his name?
His birth name was Joe Nathan, Joe, then Nathan, Dent.
Okay.
But he converted to Islam, and he became Yusef Alim Rahim.
Okay. Yusef Ali Rahim.
Yusef Alim Rahim.
Oh, I get you. Mm-hmm. Okay. Gotcha. All right. So quickly, I'm going to keep you on too long, but how has Hammond changed from that kind of Mayberry RFD kind of vibe where it's, everybody was all in on one accord? How has it changed since then?
It has changed so that I don't even recognize it anymore. There was a time that I knew everyone knew me. We got along well. We all knew our neighbors. We all looked out for one another and did the whole thing. Now, I have people living on my street that I don't even know, which is like 3 or 4 houses down from me. I have no clue who those people are. That never happened when we were growing up. We knew everybody. These people who have moved in are from totally different mindsets and backgrounds. They have no sense of community, in my opinion, and they're all on their own little plane and do their own little thing and really are not into trying to know one another. They stay to themselves, and then we've learned, those of us who have been here longer and living on this street forever, we still communicate, but we just let the others be.
And what street do you live on now?
Cleveland Street.
Okay, you're in Cleveland.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Back to Cleveland. It's such a crazy thing how it goes around, and you can wind up almost back to the same place where you were when you started.
Okay.
Yes. When my parents lived here, I was a little child. I could not have been more than a year or two. But then when I wanted to build a house, and there again, we were restricted as to where you could build houses. You could not just go and get a lot someplace and build a house. at the time that we wanted to build a house, like 1961 or so, you had to stay. The only place anybody was selling your property to you would be right where you were, and it was pretty much in the black area. So we built our house here on Cleveland Street.
Okay. And that was near Miss Haskins' house?
Yeah, Miss Haskins' house is on the corner across the street from me.
Okay. As far as the houses and the camaraderie of Cleveland Street, seeing that I'm talking Cleveland Street, so there was some influential people who did a lot of stuff on Cleveland Street.
Weren't the McClendons? Cleveland Street, it has so much history from the Parishes to the McClendons to the Hicks to the Thompsons to the Harwells, the Alexanders. All of the people came from Cleveland Street. I mean, it's just amazing. The Haskins. All of us lived on this street together.
Okay, so that was an interesting street. When my dad moved from Conkey, he moved over to 164th, where he is now. But Cleveland's just one couple streets over from that.
Right.
And
Cleveland is the next street from 164th.
Right.
Block north.
So what? Now, were you on Cleveland Street when all those people were there?
I was on Cleveland Street with the McClendons. The McClendons lived across the street. And there again, that's crazy. We meaning my family and my husband and my children, we lived on Field Street until we moved over here on Cleveland Street and built this house. The McClendons live across the street from us on Cleveland, and then they built a house on Field Street.
All right, I remember. Right. Okay, and then the Haskins moved out and moved to
California,
San Bernardino or wherever. Right. And
the Parishes lived down in the next block, and when Roland graduated from college down at Purdue, he was on a totally different plane. He just went, and he wound up in Dallas, Texas, and then he started buying McDonald's just like you go out and buy a White Castle hamburger. Every time I look up, he was buying a new McDonald's. So I think he's up to like 27, 28 McDonald's now that he owns in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Excellent. And he's another person I want to get on this interview.
You know what? Hold on. My battery is going down. I want to change phones.
Oh, okay.
I must not have had my phone on the charger all day because I just got a little signal that the battery is low. Let me see if I can make this work without too much of an effort. Okay, are you there?
Yeah.
Oh, good, because I thought I was going to lose you. I hadn't had to do this ever.
Okay, well, I'm probably asking you a billion questions, so.
That's okay.
So can you tell me a little bit about Brooks House?
Oh, yes. Brooks House was a God save for so many people, and it was good for our community because the Baptist organization, they set it up to serve the underserved, which they did, and they served our community well for years and years and years. That was our go-to place. Everything that we needed was there at Brooks House. When my mom had my younger brothers, they had a clinic at Brooks House where they would go in and nurses would weigh the children, measure them, see how their growth was and all that. That was part of Brooks House. We had a library at Brooks House. We had all these activities. We even had a skating rink upstairs where we would roller skate. We had parties there. The basketball gym was there. In fact, my wedding reception was at the Brooks House in the gymnasium. We used to have these Christmas programs there, the Hanging of the Greens, which was phenomenal. And I'm thinking now that I just thought about it, the people who put that on, I mean, it was just like a Broadway production. It was absolutely phenomenal. Everybody was involved. All of us had parts where we had to either sing, dance, did our whole thing as far as acting. First introduction to acting was through Brooks House, because they had all these different plays and different activities where it gave us opportunities to explore and to showcase our own talents. So Brooks House was the go-to place. It was just wonderful. After school, you could not wait to get there, to go and their game room or go to the library. I did all of my homework at the library. There was always people there. There were people there who could help you with your homework, who were part of Brooks House staff. And then even some of our teachers had gotten to the point that they knew a lot of us were going there for doing homework. And at that time, there was some, quote, unquote, unwritten law that you could not be married and be a teacher. They wanted you to have, in the teaching profession, to be totally dedicated to teaching, where you did not have any distractions. So a lot of times when people left the teaching profession at that time was because they wanted to get married and they could not be married and be a teacher. But some of the teachers who were our regular teachers at Maywood School and at Hammond High, even though I had not got to Hammond High at that time, the teachers would come over and help at the library and help with homework. And they were very much a part of our community. Brooks House was, as I said, the best thing going at that time, and that's why when the Baptists pulled out, because they were going in different directions, and that's people were getting older, and they weren't getting the funding and the support that they needed from the Baptist Congress that was a part of running Brooks House, that when Brooks House was finally torn down, the community wanted to have another place like Brooks House, and that's when they tried to get the Ophelia Steen Center built. Unfortunately, the land was not available to do all the things that you had at Brooks House, because where the Ophelia Steen building now stands was the old retirement home for teachers. Every teacher who was in the system in Hammond, when they retired, they went up to the retirement home, which was St. Anne's Home, which is now where the Ophelia Steen Center is located. But they all, came from, in most instances, they got to Hammond through the Baptist organization, became teachers, or they were raised in Hammond and became teachers. But they still had the affiliation with the Baptist organization. And Brooks House was just phenomenal. I mean, I can't even begin to think about all the stuff that happened. We used to have our NAACP meetings there. We used to have, and I was a young kid when Mr. McClendon, Older McClendon, the father of Wayman and Bill McClendon, was the president of the NAACP. And I'll never forget, I could not have been more than 5, 6, 7 years old when I was at the NAACP meeting with my mom, and because I belonged to the youth NAACP from the time I was old enough to have a card, and we were at the NAACP meeting when Mr. McClendon had a heart attack, and he died, and I didn't know what had happened. I knew he had gotten sick, and Mom ushered us out real quickly, and then I found out later that he had a heart attack at the NAACP meeting and died.
Okay.
But Brooks House was wonderful. I had nothing but good things to say about Brooks House and the church that was associated with it. We, used to go to the church. The church was located right behind Brooks House on Field Street on the corner, and we used to go over there for church services and whatever. But everybody who was a part of Brooks House, they were really truly dedicated to the community, and then they also ran the camp every year that most of us who grew up here went to, Camp Okolona, which is part of the Baptist organization. But we would go every summer for camp, and that was through Brooks House.
Okay. So at the time of Brooks House, at the height of that, and everybody was real cool, it was a family scenario. Who were the activists at the time? Who stirred things up and made life better for black people? Who were those people?
Jewel Alexander Sr., T.J. Alexander, Floyd Hayes. They were the ones that and my uncle Grant Harwell. They were the ones, like when injustices occurred, they were quick to make sure it didn't happen again. They were the ones going down to City Hall, telling the then mayor, whoever it was, I can't remember if it was Mayor Clan or whoever, this is not acceptable. I mean, they would stand up and putting their lives in jeopardy because they were standing up against the establishment and saying right is right, But they were activists. In fact, my very first time ever being in the presence of Martin Luther King Jr. was through my cousin, Jewel Alexander. There was a gathering and a protest, and it was over at Soldier Field in Chicago. There was a bus that left Hammond. A couple of buses left Hammond. Reverend Burns was part of that group as activists. We all went over to Soldier Field. Martin Luther King was there. And then left there and went over to Bridgeport to protest the housing and whatever. Well, I had my son with my young son. He was a baby in a stroller, and my daughter Carmen. I couldn't go on the march because they didn't want anybody, women and babies, to be over there because it might get volatile, which it did because they started throwing bricks and stuff at people. But that was my first involvement with really, I had always been involved with civil rights because my mom was in AACP and growing up. But that was my first involvement with Martin Luther King Jr. and being a part of that movement and following the lead of the leaders, Reverend Burns, Floyd Hayes, Jewel Alexander, T.J. Alexander. They were the people who were out here saying, hey, some of this stuff ain't right. Y'all need to get it together, and stop treating people this way or stop misusing people.
Were there ever any repercussions against any of those front runners?
Oh, sure, I'm sure, many, many times. I remember, and I don't know when it occurred or what exactly happened, but I remember hearing, and at that time, when grown people got together and talking, kids didn't sit around. They tell you, this is grown folks, y'all move. But I remember hearing about somebody threatening Jewel Alexander, and they were afraid that something would happen because he had gotten some threats on something. And I know it was because he was so vocal and saying, you just don't do this to people, and we're not going to take it, and trying to get people motivated to do the right thing and getting people to step out and say we have to be together for certain things, So I'm sure there were others, but I do remember hearing something about that. To what extent and what, I don't remember, but I remember hearing, that conversation about him being threatened.
Okay. So do you remember any incidents where there was the dark side of Hammond? Any and I'm sure there's a lot of stuff happening on Concord Street, but I mean, in terms of just the dark side of Hammond, that you would hear the next day, like, did you hear da-da-da-da-da, all the stuff that happens behind the curtain. Do you know of any of those stories?
Oh, offhand I can't. I'm sure there's many, but offhand I can't think of anything in particular that sticks out. Okay. I know there were. I know there were a lot of things that happened, and we find out like the next day, well, this so and so was shot, or this one did that, or this one had a wreck, or that kind of stuff. But specifically, I can't think of anything.
Okay. Do you remember when Janice Payton got into an accident?
Oh yeah. When she was killed, she and her friend.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that very vividly because that was our family reunion weekend, and we were downtown Chicago. That was for the Harwell and Alexander family reunion. We were downtown Chicago when we got the call that she had been in an accident because she and her friend were coming over to the family reunion later that evening. And we got the call that she had been in an accident and she was killed, I mean, it just totally devastated me, and because we all grew up together. Janice and I grew up together. She was a year older than me, but we all, grew up together, and it was just totally devastation for everybody at the reunion because we just could not believe it. Yep.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about Pearline Jenkins, since I can't talk to her.
Okay. She was another one who really looked out for a lot of people. I should have included her in that group of people speaking out and being an activist, because she was president for the Hammond NAACP branch for years and years. Everybody in this state knew Pearline. Everybody in NAACP knew Pearline because she did not throw a rock and hide her hand. She was vocal. She would stand toe-to-toe with anybody if something was wrong. She did not take any stuff from anybody. And we all called her Aunt Pearline because she was with my mom and dad, before I was born. And she and her husband, James Jenkins, were at the hospital when I was born. And she would tell me all the time that she saw me right after I was born. She saw me before my mom did, because my mom had to have a cesarean section, and at the time Mom was out, And when I was born, then they were showing the baby to my dad and to Aunt Pearline and Uncle James, because they were there to support my mom and dad. But Aunt Pearline was another one of those people who, like I said, was a strong activist and would put her life on the line for many, many people. She and her husband also financed so many kids to go on to school. I cannot even begin to tell you the number of kids that they helped to support to go to college. She and Uncle James did that religiously. There was someone who really wanted to go to school, and they were having difficulty, didn't have the money, because any money at that time was a lot of money. Right now it doesn't seem like much, but a couple $100 for somebody trying to go to school, and they didn't have it. That meant they either had the money or they couldn't go to school. Aunt Pearline and Uncle James did that for a number of people from Hammond to help them to go on to school. They paid money for, and then they contributed money and helped them out while they were in school.
Was there a big community organization that most of the black people were involved with? Like, was it NAACP, or did they have their own community group?
No, NAACP was that. Everybody who thought they should be in was in it. Now, there again, people did not support the NAACP, but they knew if they got in trouble, who was the first person they called? Pearline Jenkins and NAACP. They knew how to reach her for that. They didn't know how to come to meetings or to pay their little, pay their yearly dues. And she would tell them all the time, said, you are a member of the NAACP if you are black, and you are a member whether you pay your dues or not.
Right, because she'll use us either way.
She would tell them all the time, oh, yeah, you're a member, you just haven't paid your dues because you're black. You are a member, oh, yeah.
Okay. So how important do you think Reverend Burns was to the city?
Extremely, because he was the pastor of the largest church at that time, had the most members, and he was not afraid to speak out. Now, some instances he would, draw criticism from people, but had it not been for him, in a lot of instances, certain things would not have been accomplished. And they knew that they needed to deal with him because he had the largest church in town, and almost everybody went to Mount Zion.
Okay. And what were some of the offshoots of Mount Zion? You know how the big mega churches now, create homes and this, that, and the other. What was the offshoot of Mount Zion and what they've actually built?
Well,
maybe not a structure, but it could be even in theory or in terms of outreach to the community.
well, there was a structure built. The Senior Plaza was built by Mount Zion, along with money from HUD. The Senior Citizen, it's called Mount Zion Pleasant View Plaza on the corner of Kenwood and Road Street. That was Mount Zion built. Mount Zion Church, under the pastorage of Reverend A.R. Burns, built that. He worked to get that money. He went back and forth to Indianapolis and to Washington. He said, our people need a senior citizen home where they can live in the community without having to go out of state or go back with their kids. They need a place here. And he lobbied and got that done.
Okay, excellent. And is Mount Zion now still under the Burns, tutelage, or is it? How does that work? Or did he totally pass it on to another pastor?
Well, he retired, and then the board hired another minister, because that's how Baptist Church operates. They hire their own, unlike Methodist, where they have to go through a bishop and a council. We have the opportunity to hire our own, and so after he retired, then the church had a search committee, and they started looking for pastors that met what the membership wanted as far as a minister and leaders and all that. And we, did due diligence, and along with the help of the National Baptist Convention, they helped as far as the search was concerned to find, recommended people who met the criteria of what we were looking for as far as a pastor. And then they wound up hiring the current pastor, William Collins, who was unfortunately not a pastor before. He was a minister in a church in Chicago, but he had never been a pastor before. But somehow or another, the search committee thought that he was the one that was going to, service the needs of the church, and so he was hired. So he's the current pastor.
Okay. So I just have two more questions. One is, in your estimation throughout the time that you've been in Hammond, which is forever, who are some of the people who've gone on from Hammond on a national level to do things, to make a name for themselves and maybe Hammond? Who stood out, whether politicians or, and you've already mentioned one, which is Roland, who's gone on to create a McDonald's empire, in terms of franchises and stuff. So can you think of any other people?
Oh, there's a number, because we did have an actor that was from Hammond, James Edwards. Now, he was the son of Anne Riley. Miss Riley used to be at Mount Zion years and years ago. That was Miss Riley's son, Jimmy. They call him Jimmy Edwards. He was an actor in Hollywood. He made a couple films, and he always referenced his beginnings from Hammond, Indiana. And at that time, there were very few African-American actors in Hollywood. And he was one that his resume stood out among many. And I think he died sometime like in 1969 or 70. I remember, the big hullabaloo when he died, because we had people in Hammond who came from Hollywood and to his service at Mount Zion, because that's where he grew up. And I think he's buried in Hobart, I think at Evergreen. I think, if I'm correct, I think it's Evergreen. He's Evergreen Cemetery is where he's buried. But he grew up in Hammond, so he was one. Okay. Then we had, you want somebody back in that era, I guess.
Anyone who, even if it's earlier or later.
Okay. Well, much later, Jeff Morrow from Hammond.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yes.
And Jeff got his claim to fame now, being on Empire and whatever, and doing music and stuff for Empire. But prior to that, he was very, very active in Columbia University, teaching and broadcasting and the whole thing. And then we had, like Gerard. Gerard was on TV for a couple of years, many years, had his own show, Gerard McClendon. And now he's on another cable channel. But before he was on because you could watch him from all over the country. He was like on a Channel 9 cable channel for his show, which was outstanding, absolutely outstanding. He had a very good show. I know I'm missing people. I know I am. There's a lot of people who have done so many great things that are from Hammond, and it's not coming up right now.
Okay. One person that popped into my head was Irv.
Yeah,
Cross.
Irv Cross, right. Yeah, Irv, playing, football and then becoming a national broadcaster and the whole thing. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was another one, too. Like I said, there are many that is just not, they're really like escaping me right now where I can't, pull them up. But they had, stellar careers. Grew up here in Hammond, then went on to do other great things and were recognized, so.
Okay. Well, I think I got it, and even if there's if you text me or call me or something, if something else pops out, I think we got from your perspective a view of Hammond, and like I said, there are many people that I want to talk with. I want to call Dorothy Daniels. She's all the way in Texas or
right,
somewhere.
In Houston, right.
In Houston. So there's lots of people that I knew because of my mom.
Right.
And that just would come by, and I would know these names like Janice Payton, which is my mom's good friend. And there was just all these names, the Blackmans, the this, that, and the other. So, and I plan on calling all these people just to get a flavor of what Hammond was. And so I want to end this with the last question is, what, in your estimation, if possible, could the residents of Hammond do to bring it back to that camaraderie, that home kind of vibe? Is there anything, if possible, is there anything that Hammond can do and the residents of Hammond can do to bring it back to where it was when it was just all love?
I cannot think of anything because, number one, we have so many new and different people that nobody knows. And I don't know I can't think of anything that can bring it back to how it was. Too many strange, backgrounds and beliefs. Just like today, I was out in front of my house, sweeping in front of my house, cleaning up the street, and this lady came by who lives in the community. She said, "Why are you out there sweeping the street?" I said, "Because this is my house, and I want it nice and neat." She said, "Oh, I wouldn't be doing that. I wait for the city to sweep the street." I said, "Well, unfortunately, they don't clean it when I wanted it clean, so I'm cleaning it. So you have a good day. I'll see you later."
Okay, and that's that's just a sense of pride and ownership that you can't teach that.
Right, and see, and where she lives, maybe I don't know, but she said, "I want me out there cleaning. Let the city." I said, "Well, I'll clean it up. This is where I live, so let me clean up in front of my house, get these extra leaves and paper up and clean it up." My grass was cut, looked really good. They cut it yesterday. Grass looking good, but there's paper and stuff out in the street. Let me clean this up, okay? All it takes is a broom and a little dustpan, and I can sweep it up and it looks nice and neat around my house, And the lady across the street, she does the same thing. And we both happen to be out there at the same time cleaning up. So, but that's where that happens. Elsewhere, I have no idea. Or if it does happen, I have no idea.
Well, that's just hometown pride right there.
Yep.
So
right, exactly. But as far as the other, I don't know. I mean, we all would like to see it back to a point where you feel comfortable walking down the street and you could just go out like you want to. Right now, you can't. You can't do anything. I mean, there was a time that I could let my mom, when she was walking back, when she would walk down to church by herself, I had to stop that because I didn't know who these people were down the street that she's walking past.
Right.
Some of them had zero respect for her, where other people would say, hey, you know, that's Miss Cherry or that's so-and-so. Don't be using that language around here. You don't get that anymore. They will cuss you and everybody else out around you and don't even temper their language whatsoever. No respect. But it's just a regular thing. I mean, think like it's okay. Well, okay, it's not okay as far as I'm concerned. So I have to think on that one, Bob. I'm going to think about that. What can we do? Maybe I can, maybe I'll try to filter it a little bit more and try to not be so negative.
It's all, everything's fair game because what is, it is, what was, and it's all fair game. And this is just to give it insight into what things were and who was what, and that we really existed. And that's kind of important for me is to know that I came from something, and you might not even know Hammond. As a matter of fact, a lot of people don't know Hammond; they just know Gary. If I say Gary in Chicago, they'll know that. No, you know Gary? Oh yeah, Jackson 5. You know him?
Yeah,
whatever.
That's it. Right.
So it's important that to let not just the Hammond Library and just everyone know that we existed. And 50 years from now, it's important to pull up these communications and to hear.
Definitely. And I'm working with the librarian at the Hammond Library because I've already told her we've got to do better. But see, our problem, we had a history room, and we had a couple people who volunteered to do that. Those people are no longer volunteering, and it's hard. You can't just hire somebody to do it because there's no funding in the library organization to hire somebody to do that. So it's really, we have relied totally on volunteers because I'm on the library board, so that's why I can speak so freely about it.
Okay. Do you know Mr. Woods?
Mr. Wood?
Wood, the black gentleman?
No.
He's the only black gentleman there, in the information desk.
Oh, right yeah. Okay, yes.
Yeah, he's the last guy in the back, all the way in the back. But I talked to him when I come there, and he knows the McClendons. He knows the whole nine. So So at one point, this will be. We're hoping that this is a significant venture for them. Or I'm just going to make it. There's no question about it. I'm going to make it that. So, we can't really, in my business, we can't ask for permission. We just have to do it. And we'll ask for forgiveness if we do it wrong, but we just ask for whatever.
I hear you.
So, but thank you very much for this conversation.
Yes, it brought back a lot of things I had forgotten about. Like I said, if I think of other things, I will definitely get in touch with you. I'm sure I know I've missed a lot because just talking, just off the top and not really, having chronological order for things is sort of difficult. But I can probably think of some other things and maybe share those later with you.
Oh, for sure. And you did give me a lot. I mean, this was about an hour and a half interview. So you did give me a truckload, which is good, and it's considered, it's archived now. Okay. So it's history. So it's all good. Hold on one second. I'm going to cut this off.
Okay.